I'm standing here next to this painting of Humpty Dumpty by Delos McGraw because today we're talking about cultural and media literacy. So I'm going to step away just for a second so you can see the painting a little better. This is an egg, and it would be expected that a viewer would consider that it is Humpty Dumpty when seeing it. Now, the reason this relates to our studies this week is because we're going to be looking at media and cultural literacy. And television is a major transmitter of media in this culture. So when we're presented with these narratives and images on our small screen, we're expected to have this type of cultural literacy when we're seeing certain images. So there's a familiarity and an expectation that viewers will have this kind of relationship with some of the images that are being transmitted. This week we're going to be looking at some animated programming and these types of animated offerings that are created for an adult market, such as South Park, The Simpsons, Family Guy, etc., are often poking fun at one another, and they have an expectation that viewers will understand the other shows that are being referenced and be able to partake in the humor that way. That kind of references from one fictional text to another is an intertextual reference. We'll also be looking at some real-world events that get referenced in our fictional texts, and these types of real-world events that get referenced in a fictional text are called extra-textual references. When we look at South Park, we'll see South Park, and sometimes The Simpsons does this as well. They poke fun at themselves in their own shows. That's a little bit fancier, and that's called an intra-textual reference. So this type of cultural or media literacy really takes a level of critical thinking to be able to kind of encounter this level of references in our programming, both fictional and in our non-fictional events as well. So sometimes when we're watching the news, they'll be talking about fictional events. Sometimes when we're watching fictional shows, they'll be talking about real-world events. And so this can become kind of confusing, except for we live in such a media and culturally literate world that most people are really adept at this and kind of do this without even thinking. So the one thing I really want to point out here is you really need a basic understanding of historical events, and sometimes we will encounter these kinds of real world references and not understand them, and then go out and figure out why it was funny on, say, Saturday Night Live, a sketch comedy, or a show like The Daily Show. And so sometimes students are getting these real world events via pop culture. So that kind of media and cultural literacy really expects a lot out of a viewer, and there's a level of historical and pop cultural knowledge that is considered the norm. When people are not familiar with these types of programs that are generationally expected, they're really not able to fit in with their peers. And I have a friend, when I installed art at the Museum of Contemporary Art, right after I got done with my MFA at Columbia College, I was still living in Chicago and working at the MCA as a preparator. And one of my preparator friends that I worked with, she didn't grow up with television, and it was really difficult for her on occasion because we had a boss who loved The Simpsons, and he would kind of talk in Simpsons speak, and I knew what he was saying, but she really wasn't able to follow directions or rules at work because she didn't have that level of familiarity with an animated program. And so the rest of us had to kind of fill her in. And it was kind of an interesting thing for me to encounter someone like that, because most people do have that level of familiarity with television. Even if they don't have a set, they've seen the clips on YouTube, etc. She really didn't have a lot of familiarity with television at all, and anything that she did was kind of knew she was learning about at the college years. And so that was really an interesting encounter. So if you ever do meet people who didn't grow up with television, and by that I also mean streaming services and the internet these days, it's really kind of an interesting thing to talk about TV with them and to see where they're missing things that you find really just everyday knowledge. Another thing I wanted to point out here when I'm talking about texts, a lot of times when we're talking about texts, we are talking about books. We're talking about the written word. But a text can also be a television show, a film, a song. Anything that is in a fixed form is a text. A painting, this is a text. This is a gouache painting, and it could be referred to as a text and cited MLA style if you're referring to it in a paper. So just to throw that out there, when we're talking about television shows and films, those are texts as well. So thanks for your attention with this. And again, when there's one fictional program making reference to another fictional program, that's an intertextual reference. When a fictional programming is making reference to a real world event, that's an extra textual event or an extra textual reference. And when a program makes reference to itself, a fictional program referencing itself as a fictional program, that's an intratextual reference. There is a short quiz this week. I just want to make sure that you have those terms. And this kind of these kinds of terminology that are super specific, I find it really interesting moving forward. So these are terms that might help you out in later classes in the television department, in the cinema and television arts department, either in TV classes or in your film classes. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope that you enjoy this week's studies.